Hi. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Grace Weiler. I am the politics editor at the Sacramento Bee, and we are joined this evening by two of our excellent political reporters, Jenna Hatch and Nicole Nixon. And we're going to be talking about Donald Trump versus the state of California. A big area of coverage for us this year. I think we have mentioned that this is going to our subscribers, that this is going to be a big topic area where we'll be focusing our coverage for the past couple of months, but really in the last week and a half now. It has become really clear that Donald Trump and California will be at odds for the next 4 years in so many ways and on so many different topics. I want to thank you all for your engagement prior to this event. We've gotten such great questions from readers via email and via Instagram and other platforms. And please keep those questions coming in the comments as we move forward tonight. But with that, I will kick it to Jenna and Nicole, who can answer some of your questions. Thanks for joining us, girls.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Genevieve Hatch, California politics reporter.
I'm Nicole Nixon, also California politics reporter.
We're super happy that you're here. We got some questions from people on our team in the newsroom. We also got several questions from readers via email. So we're going to be going through those. We're also really excited for audience questions if you're joining us live. Before we start, we were talking before this, who knows what's going to happen in the next 60 minutes. So we're going to try, or at all, we're going to try our best to answer these as accurately with as much clarity as we can while understanding the fact that the news is changing really fast, kind of in rapid time.
Yes, in real time.
In real time. So yeah, we're going to do our best, but thank you for joining us.
And please put questions in the chat so we can answer them. Okay, first question says, Attorneys General for 18 states, including California's Rob Bonta, are suing Trump after he signed an executive order attempting to end birthright citizenship. Bonta also said he's keeping a close eye on Trump's executive order targeting transgender people. What does it mean when California is suing the Trump administration? What does that legal battle entail? What is the process and the end goal?
That's such a good question. I feel so we're going to see a lot of these lawsuits. That is one of the checks and balances in our government. The judicial system gets to intervene if something is unlawful, or alleged to be unlawful. So the first thing that a lawsuit does is essentially put a temporary restraining order on a law so that we can't enact it right away or enforce it right away. So that's kind of the first symbolic and practical thing about a lawsuit, is that a judge could say, you know what, we're going to block this as we litigate it. So that's basically what Attorney General Rob Bonta and other attorneys general are doing.
Now, obviously, the end goal of a lawsuit is to get something overturned and thrown out so that it's not applying to us. So this was a big theme in Trump's first term. The state of California sued the Trump administration 126 times. So I think we can fully expect to see something along those lines as well. I think there've already been a few filed during the first week. So we'll be keeping an eye on those lawsuits and covering them and keeping you all updated.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have another question? All right. A new directive from Trump's administration removed long-term restrictions that prevented U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, from conducting operations at schools and other sensitive places. A California lawmaker has already introduced a bill requiring schools to warn students if ICE is on campus. Do you expect it to pass? Do you expect legislation to be introduced counteracting Trump's directives?
Yes, I think I would definitely, I don't know about this bill. I haven't honestly read the bill, and it's a little early. They're not debating specific bills in the legislature yet, but I would absolutely say to expect legislation this year trying to counteract what Trump is trying to do. I think, obviously in Trump's first week, he rolled out some executive orders on immigration, transgender rights, those things. But I think that obviously he just got into office, and this is going to be changing and moving over the next 4 years. So, I mean, it all remains to be seen.
I think it's also worth pointing out that the California state legislature has really robust diversity caucuses. So we have a really robust Latino caucus, LGBTQ caucus, Black caucus, and those caucus members are really prepared to rally around these specific issues and get traction for their bills and their legislation, kind of pushing back on this stuff. So I do think that is one thing about the California state legislature. There are lots of pockets that are prepared to organize within the caucuses themselves, but also as all of them together.
Going back to the last question about lawsuits, though, a lot of times the executive orders that Trump is signing will conflict with things already in California law, and the California legislature will pass things that will be in direct conflict with whatever Trump is signing or laws maybe that Congress might pass. So again, those will go to court, and really some of these state laws may end up in court and also get thrown out. Yeah. So a lot of this, push and pull back and forth between the White House and the state government will play out in the legal system.
Yeah, that reminds me. So today, I don't know, like 2 hours ago, Andrew Sheeler has already written this story. Donald Trump signed an executive order that talked a lot about parental rights. Parental rights have played a really big role in the conversation around LGBTQ students and privacy. So the state of California last year passed somewhat controversial. I mean, it passed by a lot, but there was really vocal opposition in the Republican Party. Essentially, it was the bill that barred parental notification policies across public schools in California. So a teacher cannot be forced to share a student's identity, gender identity, with that student's parents. But Trump's executive order today actually sort of directly conflicts with that. And so that is going to be one of those issues that's just going to have to play out in the courts. Are we ready for our next question?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh, we're only 8 minutes in. We have so much time.
Okay. Is the Sacramento Bee really going to focus all of its energy for the next 4 years on Trump like they did last time he was in office? Well, I think it is important for us as journalists to cover actions that the president takes, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden or any other president, and report on what they're doing and how it affects your life, and what state officials do if they try to, fight that or challenge that. So we're also covering things that are not Trump. If you go to our website, there are many stories, at least on the politics beat this week, about the legislature. They're doing a special session.
Governor's office. Right. Wildfires. Yeah. I think, sorry, let me scroll up to this one. I think part of why we cover it the way that we do is because we have Governor Gavin Newsom, who has really positioned himself as the anti-Trump politician. California values, right? He's really big on that, and he is not afraid to go after Donald Trump in that way. And so I think that does make, there's a lot of news there in those interactions. But to Nicole's point, I think we have a really big Capitol Bureau team, and we're doing a lot of work. We have governor reporter, state worker reporter. Nicole is at the Capitol all the time. I think that we're doing more than just this, but I also think we have a lot of reason to cover Trump the way we do. Not to mention all our amazing local reporters who do amazing work covering the city and the area of Sacramento every single day. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Next question. This was a question from a journalism student, I think, at Cal Poly. So what federal programs or grants are expected to be on the cutting block for California's public universities? Despite the legal challenges, how soon could this go into effect? This was submitted yesterday, and there's already a different answer. So we're going to do our best with this one. I think maybe we should back up and talk about the campaign and how Donald Trump on the campaign trail talked a lot about ending DEI programs, we've already talked about gender affirming care and healthcare for transgender people. So I think those are definitely on the chopping block. What we saw yesterday was the Office of Management and Budget try to freeze all federal funding, and that
that caused a lot of confusion. People weren't sure if they were going to get their SNAP benefits or their student loans but
Medicaid.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's on pause. That's already in court. I think that will begin in court on Monday. So
there's that aspect of it. I think also Nicole mentioned providers of gender affirming healthcare. Donald Trump's first executive order on transgender rights it was less about gender affirming healthcare. That one came a couple days or yesterday, I think. And it was also just kind of denying at large the existence of trans people. So legally, right? Like there are two genders. There's like your biological sex and that's it. And so any like public federally funded institution that might, a lot of people in their email signatures use their pronouns. When you go and sit with a student advisor, they might ask you what your pronouns are, and what Donald Trump wants to do and wants this administration to do is end that completely. And so if there are LGBTQ resource centers like the ones at UC Davis or Sac State, those are the kinds of things that we might see on the chopping block because of these other executive orders that aren't explicitly about budgets and things like that.
Well, and he's also, I think, already moved to end positions focused on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government. And then I think he's probably trying to push institutions of higher learning into eliminating a lot of those positions as well, which I think a lot of the DEI initiatives really took off in the higher ed community, in universities. So it'll be really interesting to see how public universities respond to that.
The question too was, how soon could this go into effect? I think it depends on what happens in the court system and how quickly those cases move, because they could go into effect immediately if they're not challenged.
Also worth pointing out that universities get a lot of federal funding, not just for these programs, but universities with hospitals, universities with research institutions get a lot of funding from federal grants. So I think that that's kind of up in the air right now as well. Next question. Okay.
With Trump's promises of mass deportation, can the Central Valley's agriculture business survive? How would a loss of workers affect California's economy? It's a great question.
I think this is something definitely at the legislature that they're already talking about and wringing their hands about, because there are promises of mass deportation. And we saw even before Trump took office, there were Border Patrol agents seen in the Central Valley and Bakersfield. And that put a lot of fear into immigrant communities. And in the days after that, people were not showing up to the fields to work. Kids were not showing up at schools. So
I think there was actually an ICE raid today in the San Luis, like one of our sister papers had that like this afternoon.
Things are moving very fast. So definitely will be a huge impact on agriculture because that industry relies so heavily on the labor of undocumented immigrants. That's no secret. But I'd also point out that construction, service and hospitality, like restaurants, all of these industries rely heavily on the labor of undocumented immigrants. So those could be.
I think the agriculture business will survive. I think we're going to see prices go up because there are going to be fewer workers that are going to feel comfortable going to work.
Fewer workers. And then if they're trying to hire to fill those positions, they're going to have to raise wages to do that. So I was talking to a political science professor, an immigration expert at UC San Diego the other day, who said he would expect food prices to go up by 10% or more if we do see mass deportations.
This next question is a fun one for you.
Okay. Is Cal Exit a thing again? Yes. Now, Cal Exit has kind of a long history going back 10 years or so. This is a potential ballot initiative that would explore California seceding from the union. Now, there are a lot of legal questions about whether this could happen, but right now, voters can sign a petition to put this on the ballot in 2026. And if it passes with 55% of the vote in 2026, then it would create essentially a commission to study the benefits, the pros and cons of seceding from the union. It wouldn't actually, it's not a vote to secede, I think.
Okay. So vote to have a commission
to have a commission to study. But it would also put the question on the 2028 vote or on the 2028 ballot. So we potentially could be voting on secession in 2028. However, that vote would not actually do anything. It would just be kind of a referendum on California's belonging to the United States of America.
There is a rich history of Californians wanting to secede. There's like the New California movement. There's State of Jefferson and El Dorado County. I wrote a story last year about this El Dorado County just on 50, or like, we're different enough to do our own thing and we want to do our own thing. So there's like a long history of pockets of California wanting to be their own state. They have broadly and consistently been very unsuccessful, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of like fomenting interest in, and these are typically more conservative counties that don't like the supermajority in Sacramento and stuff like that. So it's sort of a way to assert like, we're not like that. So in some ways they're really symbolic efforts and again, not legally successful, but symbolically, I think.
Great. I should say I talked to the man behind the Cal Exit petition a few weeks ago, and he felt strongly that this is the year to do it. And he talked about, because they tried this in 2016 or after the 2016 election, and he said there was some resistance because Californians just couldn't believe that the rest of America wanted Donald Trump because he didn't win the popular vote. This time he's won the popular vote and the Electoral College. So it kind of was like, okay, people can't lie to themselves about this anymore. Like, this is the leader of America. And then he also pointed out, you know, the funding, the tug of war funding over FEMA and making disaster aid political, and the fact that California is considered a donor state, which means our taxpayers send more money to the federal government, billions, tens of billions more than we get back every year. So
it's actually a good segue to the next question. Am I asking this one?
Go ahead.
Okay. What's the constitutionality of Trump threatening to hold up federal disaster funding, like for the LA fires, unless California puts into action right-wing policies he's pushing, i.e. voter ID laws?
Well, we as journalists can't speak to whether, you know, this is going to be found unconstitutional or not. I think definitely it will go to court if Trump is trying to withhold federal disaster aid.
There's also, Congress has a say in how resources are allocated. There are California Republicans in Congress whose districts have been affected by wildfire. Someone like Doug LaMalfa, who represents Butte County, where there was the Camp Fire in 2018, where the entire towns of Paradise and Magalia were essentially leveled, similar to what we saw in Los Angeles. And I don't know how congressional Republicans are going to feel about that. So I think there's going to be a lot of politics there. And then to Nicole's point, like the constitutionality, that will be decided, like lots of things in this conversation, in the courts. Ooh, this is a good one for you.
Okay, what's the status of Governor Gavin Newsom's special session? So the governor called a special session to protect California's values, I believe were the words he used, on November 7th, 2 days after Trump won the election. And about a month later, they announced that they were going to spend $25 million on the Attorney General's office to kind of prepare and get lawsuits ready right away. And I think that this is mostly a symbolic special session because the Attorney General's office is funded. If they needed an emergency earmark, more money, they could ask for that and the legislature could do it. So that's been kind of in the works for a few weeks. At the beginning of January, the governor expanded the special session to include $2.5 billion for wildfire aid. They were already in a special session, so they were able to pass that right away. The bills to send money for court battles with Trump, there's $25 million for the Attorney General. There's $25 additional million for nonprofit legal aid services. One that's gotten a lot of sort of pushback from Republicans is $10 million specifically to immigration legal aid organizations that will help. They could potentially help fight deportation. So that's gotten a lot of pushback from Republicans. It's passed in the Senate, and I believe the Assembly will take it up for a final vote tomorrow.
Ooh. Do you want to talk, I know I'm like expanding on the question that we just got, but do you want to talk a little bit about what the legislative Republicans, like what their response has been to this special session? Because there's been a ton of pushback. You've been at the Capitol a lot.
Definitely. I mean, Republicans have hated the idea of the special session from the get-go. They think that it's just a way for California to get attention kind of in the wrong way. One Republican senator got up when they were debating these bills and said that we're poking a stick in the eye of the federal government with one hand while asking for money for the fires with another hand. So that's not really a good look.
Yeah.
So Republicans have been opposed to the $50 million for legal aid. Yeah, Trump-proofing is the word everyone's been using. But those should get their final votes tomorrow.
Interesting. All right. Do you want to read this one? This was from someone on our Instagram.
Okay. California has unfortunately seen a rise of vaccine-preventable infectious diseases over the years. Now, recently is a hotspot for bird flu in mammals. What can California do to keep people safe from infectious disease? I worry about a rise in infectious illness and weakening infrastructure for research and providing health care. So what can California do to keep people safe from infectious disease? I think that's a question for your elected representatives in the legislature. I mean, things they can do are approve money in the state budget to go to public health, which is something that they've done. They did a lot of during the pandemic. There was definitely hundreds of millions more dollars sent to the state public health department and it for epidemiology, a big vaccine rollout during COVID-19.
Yeah, I think that Newsom really positioned himself as an advocate for those public health measures during COVID. He was, of course, very pro-vaccine. And I think, I feel like that was a big part of his first term. Just for some context, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was, his hearing started today. And so that, you know, he has a lot of fans in California. We'll see how that plays out over, I think that will go on tomorrow as well. So there will be some updates at the federal level too.
Sort of these political debates over vaccines have been around for years, going back to 2018, 2019 in the California legislature. So this definitely is not a new topic. But I think the legislature and Newsom have kind of proven themselves to be very much on the side of vaccines and public health. Although I think last year there was a bit of kerfuffle in the state budget because the governor had proposed some less funding for public health and epidemiology. And advocates were saying, we don't want another pandemic. We want to be prepared. We were vastly underprepared in 2020. So
I wonder if that might also be a way that the legislature seeks to Trump-proof, because to the students' question several questions ago about what might be on the chopping block, that might be something, you know, I don't know what they're going to do with that yet. This is just me thinking. But I wonder if that's something the legislature might take on.
I think that's something that Democratic lawmakers in the legislature would definitely consider. Does the state have the money to sort of backfill every every initiative that's been funded by federal grants? Probably not.
Probably not.
But yeah.
It's an interesting question though.
Okay.
All right. I will read this one. Okay. This is a fun one. Given that Trump and Republicans are threatening to condition or withhold federal disaster aid to California, what would happen if California just held on to our collected 2024 federal income taxes and used them for wildfire and other disaster aid instead of submitting the funds to the feds? California sends roughly $83 billion more to the feds in tax dollars than we get back from the federal government.
Well, the state of California does not send your income tax. You pay your income taxes directly to the federal government when you file your taxes.
We don't send, like, Gavin Newsom doesn't sign an $83 million check and send it off.
So we would all be in trouble with the federal government if we didn't pay our federal income taxes.
Yeah. Interesting question. Right.
Okay. If Trump shuts down FEMA, what happens to the money that's been paid for flood and earthquake insurance?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh my God.
I am not educated in the inner
Yeah.
workings of FEMA and how it disperses money, unfortunately.
I feel like the state government would step in some capacity. But we just talked about this. I don't think that California can afford to backfill every single thing in our state that the federal government might pause or freeze. So
I also will say that Trump shutting down FEMA would be huge, and I think it would get a lot of pushback from both sides, because California, the fires are huge in the news right now, but it's definitely not the only state that has natural disasters. I mean, Florida, North Carolina, all of these states, every state relies on FEMA when there's a natural disaster. And Democrats in the legislature and a lot of California elected officials have been saying, this money has never been politicized. Every state gets what it needs when it comes to disasters and recovery. So that's why they're so upset about this threat to withhold funding. Okay.
Oh, interesting. Will California become the center of an automobile boom? This was an emailed question a couple days ago, I think. If so, will California be seeing most of its vehicle production from Tesla? Will this create more jobs for California? Will we see an increase of emissions in the air? This is an interesting question about transportation, infrastructure, jobs, industry. This is a loaded question.
On the one hand, the state has been building a high-speed rail line for a decade now, and it's behind schedule and over budget, and Trump has, again, threatened not to spend federal money on that. On the other hand, you have Gavin Newsom and Democrats in the legislature trying really hard to cut down on the number of gas-powered vehicles on the roads here in California and kind of push a shift to zero-emission electric vehicles. And I think it will be interesting to see what Trump does with that, because California has kind of a toughest in the nation vehicle emissions limits. Yeah. And I believe those are given to us through a federal waiver. So
interesting. Okay.
I guess hypothetically Trump could withdraw that or cancel that.
There are a couple interesting things here. So didn't Congressman Kevin Kiley.
Yes, he introduced a bill.
And he is a Trump endorsed Republican in Placer County. So that is definitely consensus on the right in California that enough. We have overspent on this with so little progress. That is, again, that's sort of the Republican talking point on this. And so I think in Congress right now, there might be support for that. There's a question about Tesla, which of course we can't talk about Tesla without talking about Elon Musk. So Elon Musk very symbolically moved from California to Texas and moved some of his operations from California to Texas. But Tesla still has a factory here.
Right, in the Bay Area.
One of many in the Bay Area. So I don't think that Tesla production is going to change very much in California.
I mean, it could. I guess it could. But
yeah.
I guess, and let's go back to the original question, which is, will California become the center of an automobile boom? I don't think that car manufacturing has ever really been a huge industry that provides a huge amount of jobs to the California economy. So, yeah.
Didn't also the EV trucks and public transportation, didn't Newsom just...
So
what's the update there?
Right. So the state, Newsom had waivers to the Biden administration, asking the Biden administration to sign off on, again, stricter emissions limits for heavy duty trucks and trains, public transit. Yeah. So those were not approved by the Biden administration. In the final days of Joe Biden being in the White House, the state withdrew those, kind of signaling that they knew that would come to pass under Donald Trump in the White House.
We want to remind you to leave us more questions. I'm having fun.
I
could do this all day. So please submit more questions if you're in the audience right now. We have a new one. Okay.
I think it's super serious that Donald Trump has pardoned 1,500 criminals, insurrectionists, traitors who tried to overthrow the 2020 election on January 6th, 2021. I want to know if any of them were from Sac County and if any are returning to Sac County. I think Jenna, you've done some reporting on this.
Yeah, so this was from a reader via email. We actually just had a story about this last week after Trump pardoned all of the people who were punished for their role in January 6th. So there were six people pardoned in the Sacramento area who had gone to DC that day and participated in some capacity in that rally insurrection. People are going to call it a different thing depending on what party they're in. A couple of those folks are from Placer County. One ran for school board, the Eureka Union School District in Roseville. One is currently teaching art, I think, in high school in a like religious school program in Roseville. It's not a school; it's like a public school. It's just their own classroom setting. But yeah, there were 6 altogether, and we've covered that. We've covered a lot of those trials. So yeah.
What does it? Were any of these people in jail? I understand.
Yes.
Some of them had already served their sentences.
Some of them had already served their sentences. I think worth talking about what it means to be pardoned. So being pardoned is not an expungement of the crime of a criminal record. I do think you get, a lot of these were felony charges. So I'm thinking one in particular was a felony charge. He served 2 to 3 years and will have years of probation. So you'll get some of your civil rights back, probably your right to vote. You'll be able to vote again, things like that. But it's not a total, like, it never happened in the legal system.
It doesn't get erased off your record.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, last chance to throw in questions because this is our last question.
Exciting.
Will Gavin Newsom run for president in 2028? Well, he's not saying no to that. He definitely, during the 2024 campaign, was a firm no. He was not interested in running for president. But I think his actions and setting up a PAC to fundraise definitely point to
someone with
presidential ambitions
or nationally a high national profile, whatever that might look like. So he said no in 2024. He was really supportive of President Biden staying in the race against Donald Trump. When Biden stepped down, he threw all his weight behind Kamala Harris. I think he campaigned. He traveled to campaign for Kamala Harris's campaign. But who knows in 2028? He hasn't said yet, but we'll ask him. Right. Any other questions from the audience or from our team if people are logged in?
All right. Well, thanks everybody for sending questions. This has been fun.
Thank
you. I guess we throw it back to Grace now.
Oh, actually, I want to remind everybody to follow our work on our newsletter. Subscribe to the Cap Alert. We have a morning, we have an AM alert, and then we have the Cap Alert throughout the day if there's any breaking political news. So be sure to follow us.
Sorry, the link is in the comments.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, one more question.
Will Kamala run for governor of California?
TBD.
Some people really want her to. A lot of people really don't want her to. I think interesting with Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, you have 2 San Francisco bred politicians, and San Francisco has become something of a punching bag for the Republican right. And so I don't know if Democrats are going to want to install another Bay Area candidate. It might be a political liability. It might be a political strength, but we're thinking about. That's a great question.
Yes.
Thanks for asking.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in.
That's it. Thanks everyone. Bye.